Hey, everybody, and welcome to the College Bowl Preview Show here on OpenSports.com. I'm Sid Rosenberg, sitting in for the lovely Amber Wilson. Smaller breasts and black hair, but it'll work nevertheless. Joined here by our very own college football analyst, the great Rob Shaw. How are you, Rob?
It's an honor, my man.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Good
Same
to see you.
Same with you.
Got a big show planned right here. The New Year's Days games are behind us right now. We're going to kick things off with the Cotton Bowl today. The Cotton Bowl features number 20 Ole Miss 8-4 taking on Texas Tech at 11-1. We all know that Ole Miss this year defeated Florida. That's a team with a pretty good defense. They give about 18 points per game. Texas Tech, on the other hand, they score at will with Harold and Michael Crabtree. What gives here, the Texas Tech offense or the Ole Miss defense?
You know, two hot teams right now, but I think the hotter team is actually the one with the 4 losses. Ole Miss has been remarkable this season. Even those 4 losses all came within a touchdown. So they're playing competitive football. And you mentioned it, beating the Gators at the Swamp. That's a pretty tough thing to do. No one else has done it all year, obviously. So Ole Miss, a very good team. Graham Harrell, a little banged up with the thumb. Remember, he has like a bunch of metal now in his hand. I think a little bit of the Tin Man going on there. So I think that Ole Miss has a good chance in this one. I like the speed of their defense, and I think defense is going to win this one simply because, as we've seen recently, the Texas Tech defense can't stop anyone.
No, they gave up 65 points to Oklahoma. Yeah. This is also a football team. You know they've got a chip on their shoulder only because Oklahoma's playing for a national championship. Yeah. Texas is in a big game against Ohio State. So here you got this football team. They lost once. They got blown out by Oklahoma, obviously, but they feel like they're getting the respect that some of these other clubs inside the Big 12 are getting. So they come into this game with a big chip on their shoulder.
And to bring it further, Graham Harrell, I mean, you're talking about a guy who very well should have been one of the Heisman finalists. He wasn't. The numbers he put up were remarkable this year. I mean, you just got to wonder how much will that injury affect him. Obviously, Crabtree, a guy we all know is going to eventually be a top 10 pick, even though I don't think the Detroit Lions will grab another wide receiver. That's just a guess there. But, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Graham is one guy who certainly has been underrated this year, and they have been getting the shaft. I mean, they only allow 2 teams from their conference in, and they're the 3rd sitting out.
Part of the reason why Ole Miss, I should say, has enjoyed the success, Rob, this year playing inside the SEC was the hiring of Houston Nutt. They won their last 5 games under Houston Nutt. He was successful wherever he's been before. Houston's done a terrific job with Ole Miss.
And they move the ball on the ground now. That's something that he brings there. He did all right in Arkansas. He had a couple of decent backs behind him. But that's a team that clearly is now moving the ball. And you see that a lot these days. It's not any big flashy offenses. Same thing with Alabama. They just simply move the ball on the ground, and their defense holds the opposition.
All right, so one more time here on the way out. Texas Tech taking on Ole Miss. What is the Rob Shaw prediction?
I'm going with Ole Miss, 20-17, limiting a very good offense, but because of the injury, I think it's only going to be 17 for Texas Tech.
How about that? One note about this football game, Graham Harrell, the quarterback for Texas Tech, needs just 2 touchdown passes for an NCAA record, but you think Ole Miss will limit him. Let's move to the next game. It is the Sugar Bowl, number 7 Utah, just one of 2 undefeated teams left after Boise State. They're going to take on that Alabama team you're talking about. Big year under Nick Saban, 12-1, had a chance to play for the national championship, but got beat by Florida inside the SEC championship. The undefeated Utah Utes against an upstart Alabama football team.
And again, I love the situation here. The possibility of a team going undefeated and not being the national champion.
Right.
You got only the BCS, but that is certainly the case this year. It's going to be interesting. The Utes offense is moving the ball pretty well these days. They have Brian Johnson throwing the ball around. He got about 24 touchdowns this year. As far as the backfield, an even split, 2 running backs with over 500 rushing yards. But Alabama, their defense is fantastic, and they almost did the near impossible, almost beating Florida the other day in that SEC title game. It's going to be a close one. I tend to like Alabama.
Yeah, I tend to like Alabama, too. Brian Johnson, as you said, did throw 24 touchdowns, only 9 picks. One of the reasons why Utah doesn't get the respect they deserve is they only beat 2 teams ranked inside the top 25, one being TCU and one being BYU. I will say this, though. One thing Brian Johnson does well is he's not only a good arm, 24 touchdowns, he can run with the football. He's a mobile quarterback. We saw what Tim Tebow did to Alabama. So if there's going to be any difficulty whatsoever for Alabama this game, it is the mobile quarterback that Brian Johnson is.
In addition, a big loss for Alabama. Andre Smith is not going to play in this one. He is a big-time tackle for them. He's on the left side, really opens the door for their rushing, and his loss could be a big factor. This is a guy they're saying is an All-American, a top 5 pick in the NFL. Again, this is big because suddenly any advantage you give to an undefeated team like Utah could open the gates for them.
Let's talk about the Alabama offense for a second. We know they're limited. Really the success for this football team was predicated upon their defensive play for most of the year, but they did have a big year out of Glenn Coffey at running back, nearly 1,400 yards, and a big offensive line. Is that the game plan here for Alabama? Just run at the coffee all day long, or does the senior quarterback Wilson do some damage?
You know, it's tough because Wilson's had a lot of time to try to prove himself, and I don't think he ever has proven the consistency you need from a quarterback in a big game. That's why they push the ball on the ground, keep it safe. That's Saban for you. He knows how to win games. Just play it safe. But the loss of that tackle is huge. Smith played a huge role. They went to the left whenever they were in doubt on third down and short. His loss is going to open up some opportunities for Utah, but they do have a kid named Julio Jones there. Young wide receiver, had a very nice year. They're saying he's one of the best talents out there at wide receiver in the nation.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. Utah did go undefeated. They won the Fiesta Bowl back in 2005, kind of the same scenario here. And I believe it was the Florida Gator head coach Urban Meyer that manned that ship back then, right?
I think, I think right now that Alabama wishes he was still there because they're not happy after that last loss.
And I think Urban's on his way to his second championship. We'll talk about that on a different show later on. Let's move to the third and final game here. It's the Fiesta Bowl. Rob, number 10, Ohio State, 10-2, losing twice inside the Big Ten this year, taking on a Texas team that lost just once. A big year for the Longhorns at 11-1. Ohio State went 7-1 inside the Big Ten. They lost to Penn State. They got blown out on the road by USC. But, of course, they got better as the season went along, especially after they made that quarterback change. That seemed to really get them lifted. Also, of course, getting back a healthy Beanie Wells helped too.
Yeah, that definitely did help put them on the ground a little bit. Yeah, this is an interesting game. I mean, if you're going to talk about the possibility of a shared national title, I guess it would be Texas winning this one, Oklahoma winning the other. Of course, Texas did beat Oklahoma earlier this year. The one loss they had, they barely lost. It was in the last seconds. Crabtree coming up huge for Texas Tech. So Texas certainly has a reason to gripe for not being in the national contest, but it still is a big game. And as far as Ohio State, I don't think that they're as good as their record indicates. 2 losses this year, but that Big Ten was a disappointment. Wisconsin was bad. Michigan was bad. I mean, you got a couple of teams that really weren't all that great. They were embarrassed by USC. They only scored 6 points against Penn State, so their offense has been abysmal at times. You mentioned that Pryor is now the quarterback for that team. That's definitely going to help them out, but I don't think it's going to be able to help them out enough. It's all about defense versus offense. Ohio State's defense is very good, but Colt McCoy has proven again and again he's one of the best in the nation. He certainly was a contender for the Heisman.
Well, he certainly was. And that game they lost at Texas Tech, he really engineered a tremendous comeback and had a chance to win that game. Threw for 32 touchdowns, ran for 10 more, completed nearly 78% of his passes.
A record, by the way.
Yeah, but, you know, Ohio State's defense is a little better than good. Let's be fair here. They only give up 164 passing yards per game. So when you combine that with Colt McCoy's success on offense, again here, something's got to give. Is it the Ohio State pass defense or Colt McCoy's offense?
You know, and I think that we could go back to what you said about Utah. What's interesting about Johnson is the fact that he's mobile. And I think that's definitely the case for Texas. I mean, it's one thing to have a good secondary, but it's another when the quarterback's able to put some pressure on the linebackers and move around a little bit. So that being said, I tend to like this game for them. I think that you're going to see Texas with the victory.
Ohio State, I guess they want to keep Texas off the football field, that high-powered offense. They can do that with the run game, with Beanie, their other running backs, and I would imagine that is going to be the game plan for the Buckeyes here, for Tressel, is to have that offense on the field as long as possible so Texas just can't score.
Yeah, not enough, though. I think Texas is just too good. Their defense is good enough. I think you're going to see them go out there. I mean, look, they limited Oklahoma. If they could do that, they should have no problem against Ohio State.
I tend to agree, no doubt about it. So those are 3 of the biggest games coming up, of course, all leading up to the national championship game, which features the Florida Gators taking on the Oklahoma Sooners. For Rob Shaw, I'm Sid Rosenberg.
Pleasure, my man.
All right, we'll see you again in a couple of days. Enjoy the college football, and we'll talk to you again in a couple of days.
Think you can complete the drive? Play today and get an automatic entry to win daily prizes, 2 tickets to the big game, and a brand new car. Start your drive today at opensports.com.